Assalamualaikum and very good morning. In this lecture, I will talk about musculoskeletal, nerve, and vessel of the orbit. This is the learning outcome for this lecture. Orbit is a cavity located in the facial skeleton of the skull. It has pyramidal shape with a base, apex, and four walls. The apex located posteriorly at the optic canal. The base located anteriorly and is formed by the orbital margin, which surround the orbital opening. Inside the orbit, you have the eyeballs, muscle, nerve, arteries and vein, and lacrimal apparatus. The orbit has four walls: superior, inferior, medial, and lateral walls. The superior wall is formed mainly by the orbital part of frontal bone and also a small contribution from lesser wing of sphenoid bone. And the superior wall separates the orbit from the brain. The inferior wall is formed mainly by the maxilla and also small contribution by the zygomatic and palatine bone. And the inferior wall is separated from the lateral wall by the inferior orbital fissure. Inferior orbital fissure. The lateral wall is the strongest and thickest wall. It is formed by two bones, anteriorly by zygomatic bone, posteriorly by the greater wing of sphenoid. The medial wall is the thinnest wall. It's formed mainly by the orbital plate of ethmoid bone and also small contribution from maxilla, lacrimal, and sphenoid bone. And the medial wall is indented to form lacrimal groove for lacrimal ducts and fossa for lacrimal sac. Here you can see the superior wall or the roof formed mainly by the orbital part of frontal bone. The inferior wall or the floor is formed mainly by the maxilla and it is separated from the lateral wall by the inferior orbital fissure. The lateral wall is formed mainly by the zygomatic and greater wing of sphenoid. This is the strongest and thickest wall, but most vulnerable to blow and trauma. The medial wall is very thin, paper thin. It's mainly formed by the orbital plate of ethmoid bone. Orbit has several important opening and groove. The first is the optic canal, which lies at the apex of the orbit. Lateral to that you have the superior orbital fissure. Inferior to that you have the inferior orbital fissure. At the superior margin of the orbit you have the supraorbital notch, and correspondingly you have the infraorbital notch, which is supposed to be here. And you have the anterior and posterior ethmoidal foramen, and also fossa for lacrimal sac. Supraorbital notch or sometimes foramen is situated at the superior orbital margin. It transmits supraorbital nerve and arteries and vein. Infraorbital groove or foramen situated in the floor of the orbit, and it transmits infraorbital nerve and vessel. Optic canal located posteriorly in the lesser wing of sphenoid. It transmits optic nerve and ophthalmic artery. Anterior and posterior ethmoidal foramina transmit anterior and posterior ethmoidal nerve and vessel respectively. Superior orbital fissure is located between greater and lesser wing of sphenoid, and this opens into the middle wing of cranial fossa. It transmits frontal nerve, lacrimal nerve, nasosensory nerve, oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, abducens nerve, and also superior ophthalmic vein. Inferior orbital fissure is located between maxilla and greater wing of sphenoid. This fissure communicates with pterygopatan fossa and infratemporal fossa, and it transmits maxillary nerve and sympathetic fibers. Nasolacrimal canal is located anteriorly on the medial wall. It communicates with the inferior meatus of the nose and transmits nasolacrimal duct. In this diagram, you can see various structures passing through various foramina of the orbit. There are 7 muscles of the orbit, and these include levator palpebrae superior, superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, lateral rectus, superior oblique, inferior oblique. The muscle number 1, levator palpebrae superior, move the upper eyelid, whereas the rest of the muscles, muscle number 2 to 7, move the eyeball. Here you can see various muscles of the orbit. First, we have the superior rectus, which attached to the superior surface of the eyeball. You have the lateral rectus, which is attached to the lateral surface of the eyeball. You have the medial rectus, which is attached to the medial surface of the eyeball. And below, you have the inferior rectus, which is attached to the inferior surface of the eyeball. So you have 4 recti muscles. You have 2 oblique muscles, and this includes superior oblique and inferior oblique muscle. Okay. Superior oblique muscle is shown here. It has pulley and is attached obliquely to the eyeball. And this is the cut muscle of the levator palpebrae superioris. This is the muscle that moves the superior eyelid. This is the lateral rectus, which is attached to the lateral surface of the eyeball. And you have the medial rectus, superior rectus, inferior rectus, and you have 2 oblique muscle, inferior oblique muscle and superior oblique muscle. In addition, you have the levator palpebrae superioris, which located superior to the superior rectus, and this muscle elevate the upper eyelid. Levator palpebrae superioris is the elevator of the superior eyelid. It raises the superior eyelid. It is inserted to the tarsal plate and skin of the superior eyelid. It has 2 components, smooth muscle part and skeletal muscle part. The smooth muscle part is called the superior tarsal muscle, and this extends from its aponeurosis to superior tarsal plate. And this part, smooth muscle part, is supplied by the sympathetic fibers, whereas the skeletal muscle part is supplied by the oculomotor nerve. In this picture, you can see levator palpebrae superioris has 2 parts, skeletal muscle part and smooth muscle part. The skeletal muscle part is supplied by the oculomotor nerve, whereas the smooth muscle part is supplied by the sympathetic fibers. You have 4 recti muscles of the eyeball: superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial and lateral rectus. These 4 recti muscles arise from common tendinous ring, which surround the optic canal and part of the superior orbital fissure. The superior rectus and inferior rectus lies in the same vertical plane, and the lateral and medial rectus lies in the same horizontal plane. And all 4 recti muscles attach to the sclera of the anterior half of the eyeball. This shows the 4 recti muscles arise from the common tendinous ring, which surround the optic canal and part of the superior optical fissure. And muscle of the eyeball have different action. Some muscle adducts, others abduct the eyeball. Some muscle elevate while some other muscle depress the eyeball, and some muscle intort or rotate inward, and some other muscle extort or rotate outward. And this is the summary of the action of muscle of the eyeball. So from here you can see superior rectus is the elevator of the eyeball. It is also adductor and rotate eyeball medially, which is intort the eyeball. Inferior rectus is a depressor of the eyeball. It also adducts and rotates eyeball laterally or extort the eyeball. Medial rectus is the adductor of the eyeball. It adducts the eyeball. Lateral rectus is the abductor of the eyeball. It abducts the eyeball. Superior oblique is the depressor, also abductor and rotate the eyeball medially or intort the eyeball. Inferior oblique is the elevator, abductor, and rotates the eyeball laterally or extort the eyeball. This diagram provides a good way to learn the action of the muscle of the eyeball. First, superior rectus intort or rotate the eyeball medially and elevate the eyeball. The inferior rectus muscle extort or rotate the eyeball laterally and also depress the eyeball. Superior oblique muscle intort the eyeball and also depress the eyeball. Inferior oblique muscle extort the eyeball and elevate the eyeball. The lateral rectus are the abductor of the eyeball, whereas the medial rectus is the adductor of the eyeball. There are several important nerves present in the orbit. We have the optic nerve, which is cranial nerve number 2, oculomotor nerve, nerve number 3, trochlear nerve, cranial nerve number 4, abducens nerve, cranial nerve number 6, and you have also ophthalmic nerve and 8 branches. Ophthalmic nerve is a first branch of the trigeminal nerve, and also you have the short ciliary nerve. In this picture, you can see various nerves of the orbit. You have the oculomotor nerve, nerve number 3. You have the trochlear nerve, nerve number 4. You have the abducens nerve, nerve number 6. And you have also the ciliary ganglion. Optic nerve is a pure sensory nerve. It enters the orbit through optic canal. And this nerve is a part of central nervous system, not the peripheral nervous system as other cranial nerve. And this nerve is surrounded by meninges, and the function of optic nerve is to carry visual impulse from the retina to the brain. The fibers of optic nerve is actually formed by the aggregation of axon of ganglion cell of the retina. Soon after it passes through the optic canal to enter the medial cranial fossa, the left and right optic nerve will fuse in a line to form optic chiasm, which then connected to the optic tract. And the detail of this nerve I will not talk here because you have learned this in more detail in the neuroanatomy lecture. Oculomotor nerve is a pure motor nerve. It's emerged in between the crus cerebri of the midbrain. It entered the orbit through the superior orbital fissure, and soon after it divides into two divisions, superior division and inferior division. Superior division innervates the superior rectus muscle and levator palpebrae superiorus muscle. Inferior division innervates the medial rectus, inferior rectus, and inferior oblique muscle. It also carries preganglionic parasutic fibers. This is the oculomotor nerve, which enter the orbit through the supraorbital fissure. It divides into two, superior division and inferior division. Superior division supplies to muscle, levator pubis pars, and also superior rectus muscle. Inferior division supply the inferior oblique muscle, inferior rectus muscle, and medial rectus muscle. And this division also carry preganglionic parasutic fibers from the Edinger-Weisberg nucleus to the ciliary ganglion. Oculomotor nerve supply all the extraocular muscles except two muscles, the superior oblique, which is supplied by trochlear nerve, and lateral rectus, which is supplied by abducens nerve. Oculomotor nerve also supply the ciliary muscle. This is muscle responsible to change the thickness of the lens. And also it supply the constrictor pupillae muscle, which is responsible for constriction of the pupil. Lesion to oculomotor nerve result in first ptosis, which is drooping of the upper eyelid, and this is due to the paralysis of levator pupillary superior. Lesion also cause the squint of the eyes, in which the eyes move down and out, and this is due to unopposed action of lateral rectus and superior oblique muscle, which are still active. Thirdly, it causes the dilated pupil, which is caused by unopposed action of sympathetic nerve. Fourthly, the lesion causes the loss of light reflex, and this is due to paralysis of constrictor pupillae muscle. And last, it causes the loss of accommodation, in which the eyes cannot focus, and this is due to paralysis of ciliary muscle. Trochlear nerve is an entirely motor nerve, and it is the smallest cranial nerve and has greatest intracranial length. And this is because it emerged from the posterior aspect of the midbrain. It emerged from the inferior to the inferior colliculus of the midbrain. It entered the orbit through the superior orbital fissure, and it supplies one muscle only, superior oblique muscle. And lesion to trochlear nerve will result in the squint. The patient have difficulty to turn their eyes downward and laterally or out, and they will complain about the diplopia, especially when looking down and laterally, such as when walking downstairs, and they compensate this by tilting their head. Abducens nerve is also a pure motor nerve. It emerged from the anterior aspect of brainstem at the junction between pons and medulla. It entered the orbit through the superior of the fissure, and it supplies one muscle only, which is the lateral rectus. Lesion to abducens nerve will result in medial squint, in which the eyes turn medially when looking ahead, and the patient just cannot simply move the eyes laterally beyond the midpoint. Ophthalmic nerve is a pure sensory nerve. It is a first branch of trigeminal nerve. It emerged from the brainstem in the lateral aspect of pons, and it supplies superior region of the face, including the eyeball, lacrimal gland, conjunctiva, nasal mucosa, skin of the scalp, forehead, upper eyelid, and nose. And it divides into three branches: the frontal branch, which is the largest branch, nasociliary branch, and lacrimal branch. This is the ophthalmic nerve, which branch into three. First, the frontal nerve, the largest branch, and you have the nasociliary nerve, and the smallest branch is the lacrimal nerve. Frontal nerve divided into two branches, supraorbital and supratrochlear. These two branches supplies the area of the scalp and the forehead. The necessary nerve, as the name suggests, supplies structures in the nose and the eyes. Lacrimal nerve supply the lacrimal gland. Okay, this is the trigeminal nerve, which has three branches: ophthalmic branch, maxillary branch, and mandibular branch. The ophthalmic branch is divided into three: frontal, lacrimal, and nasociliary. In this slide, you can see nasociliary nerve more clearly after the superior rectus and levator-pulmonary muscle has been removed. This is the lacrimal nerve. Frontal nerve passes superior to common tendinous ring, so it does not enter the common tendinous ring and pass superior to levator-pulmonary superior muscle, and it divides into two branches: supraorbital and supratrochlear nerve. Supraorbital nerve pass through supraorbital notch and supply the forehead, scalp, and upper eyelid. The supratrochlear nerve also supply the forehead, scalp, and upper eyelid. This shows the branches of frontal nerve. Supraorbital nerve located laterally, supratrochlear nerve located medially. Lacrimal nerve is the smallest branch of the ophthalmic nerve. It runs along the superior border of lateral rectus with lacrimal artery, and it supplies lacrimal gland and adjoining conjunctiva. Sensory nerve is a sensory nerve for the eyeball. It enters the orbit through superior orbital fissure within common tendinous ring. It divides into several branches. First, ganglionic branches to the ciliary ganglion. It has a long ciliary nerve which carry postganglionic sympathetic fibers to the lateral pupil muscle. Another branch is anterior ethmoidal nerve, which supply anterior ethmoidal air cells and septum and lateral wall of the nasal cavity. The posterior ethmoidal nerve supplies the posterior ethmoidal air cell, and infratrochlear nerve, which is a terminal branch of nasociliary nerve, supply the eyelid, conjunctiva, skin of the nose, and lacrimal sac. This slide shows the branches of the nasociliary nerve. First, you have the ganglionic branches to the ciliary ganglion. This is the long ciliary nerve. You have the anterior ethmoidal nerve and posterior ethmoidal nerve. These two nerves supply the ethmoidal air sinus. And you have the terminal branch of the nasociliary nerve, the infratrochlear nerve. Short ciliary nerve are branches from ciliary ganglion. It arises from ciliary ganglion and connect it with the eyeball. And this nerve carry postganglionic parasympathetic fibers originating from the ciliary ganglion to supply ciliary muscle and sphincter pupillae muscle of the iris. It also carries postganglionic sympathetic fibers from the superior spical ganglion to supply the lateral papillae of the iris and blood vessel of the eye. In this slide, you can see the ciliary ganglion, and arising from ciliary ganglion, there are several branches of the short ciliary nerve. Arteries of the orbit are mainly formed by the branches of the ophthalmic arteries, which is a branch of the internal carotid artery. Branches of ophthalmic artery include central artery of the retina, which is a small artery that runs in the dural sheath of the optic nerve, and then it pierces the optic nerve near the eyeball. And it divides into two branches, superior and inferior branch to the optic disc, and each of this then further divide into temporal and nasal branches. And this is the end artery. So therefore, occlusion of this artery will cause blindness. Second branch is the supraorbital artery. This artery passes through the supraorbital notch and supply the area of the forehead and scalp. You have the supratrochlear artery, which supply the forehead and scalp. The lacrimal arteries pass along superior border of lateral rectus and supplies lacrimal gland, conjunctiva, and eyelids. Short posterior ciliary artery pierce the sclera and supply the choroid. Long posterior ciliary artery pierce the sclera and supply the cerebral body and iris. Another branch, anterior ciliary artery, pierce the sclera at the periphery of the iris and form network in the iris and cerebral body. Another branch, anterior ethmoidal artery, pass through the anterior ethmoidal foramen to supply anterior and middle ethmoidal air cells, frontal sinus, nasal cavity, and external nose. The posterior ethmoidal artery pass through the posterior ethmoidal foramen to supply the posterior ethmoidal air cell. Dorsal artery supply the side of the nose and lacrimal sac. This slide shows branches from the ophthalmic arteries. You have the central retina artery here, small branch that supply the retina. You have the lacrimal artery supply the area around the lacrimal gland. And you have the posterior ciliary artery, several branches of posterior ciliary artery. And you have the supraorbital artery. You have the supratrochlear artery. You have the dorsal nasal artery. And you have the anterior and posterior ethmoidal artery. Anterior and posterior ethmoidal artery. In this slide, you can see the central artery of the retina, which pierces the optic nerve and pass through together with the fibers of the optic nerve to supply the retina. And this is the long posterior ciliary arteries and short posterior ciliary arteries, which supply the structures within the eyeball, as well as the anterior ciliary artery. This slide shows the supraorbital artery, and located medially is the supratrochlear artery. And these two arteries supply the area of the forehead and anterior part of the scalp. And here you have the dorsal nasal artery, which supply the lateral part of the nose. The end. Thank you very much for your attention.